Well, welcome. I am Jason Bemis Lawrence. Happy New Year to you. 2020 is leaving us. This is Before the Stream, my podcast where I have a musical discussion with a guest about an album that we both had a strong relationship with in the past, in order to check back in with it and see what we discover about how we listened then, how we listen now, what might have stuck with us or influenced us, what memories the music triggers, and how we might have changed as listeners or musicians or people. Today we're talking about Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, the fourth studio album by Wilco. The album was completed in 2001, but Reprise Records refused to release it. Wilco acquired the rights to the album and streamed it for free on their website starting on September 18th, 2001. The band then signed with Nonesuch Records in November of 2001, and the album was officially released on Nonesuch on April 23rd, 2002. Movies in the theater in April of 2002 were My Big Fat Greek Wedding, Panic Room, Bend It Like Beckham, and The Scorpion King. The top songs were J-Lo's Ain't It Funny featuring Ja Rule, Vanessa Carlton's 1,000 Miles, and Linkin Park's In the End. My guest is a good friend of mine. When we started talking, we just went right in. No intro, so I'm doing this intro right now without making him wait on me, without making him listen to it, so I can do a Marin-style intro. My friend Josh Kaufman is here. He's here. He's right here. I've got him in the closet. Hey, folks, too many musicians in your closet? Get Squarespace. Squarespace. Make it easy to shape them into squares to create more space. How was that? Josh Kaufman, Mr. Kaufy. I always have my Kaufy when I watch Radar, you know that? Everyone knows that. Now that I have my Kaufy, I'm ready to watch Radar. Where is it? Josh Kaufman is a multi-instrumentalist. He plays everything. He's a songwriter, singer, arranger, producer. He's best known for his work with Bob Weir, The National, This Is the Kit, His Golden Messenger, Josh Ritter, Craig Finn, The Hold Steady, The War on Drugs. He's a member of the groups Muzz and Bonny Light Horseman. Bonny Light Horseman is nominated for 2 Grammys this year. They're nominated for Best Folk Album and Best American Roots Performance. Here is me and my friend Josh Kaufman. Thank you. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, me too. It was really fun to dig back into this record because I hadn't in so long.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I hadn't really either.
I think it had been living in me in a pretty full way for a long time, since it came out. But I hadn't, let it play all the way through or even checked in with those songs in many, many years, actually. I don't think. I think when it came out, I was scared of imitating it because I liked it so much.
Yeah.
I guess checking back in with it was interesting because, a couple weeks ago when you mentioned we should talk about Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, I was like, great. And then we were taking a drive, Annie and Clarabelle and I, upstate where we're living right now. Yeah. And we're driving through the Catskills and stuff. And when I first discovered that record, or when I first discovered Wilco, I was living up here. It was, 20-something years ago, and we were in college, and that music was very much kind of sinking in at that time.
Yeah.
And in fact, music from the Midwest in general was sinking in at that time for me because growing up in New York, I hadn't given the Midwest much thought. I know that sounds really coastal egocentric, and I know it's a faux pas now, but at the time I just didn't give it much thought. But the music that I was pulling from, all through high school and stuff, I was super into the Jayhawks. Bands from the middle of the country were really big for me. And then Will Oldham and Drag City stuff. It was about labels, you know what I mean? Record labels.
Right.
Thrill Jockey was really big. Also, everything Jim O'Rourke produced or wrote, or those are all big records for me. So I was being introduced to this sort of Midwest way, I guess. And that music was a huge part of that. And then when I first heard Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, it was on a burned CDR before the record had come out. and I was working at a record store in New Paltz, New York, and a friend had brought it over, and we listened to the whole thing, and then I think I made a tape of it at the store there so I could listen to it in my car.
Yeah.
And then it came out, I think, about a year later, and my brother and I went to see them play at Bowery Ballroom, and we were surprised, like, no Ken Coomer, no Jay Bennett. It was Leroy Bach, Glenn Cochi, John Striat, and Jeff Tweedy, just the four of them.
Wow. And
it was so emotional. We were like right in the front of Bowery Ballroom, and they were playing, just the four of them. And it was like, it was just sweaty and loud and so raw and cool. And like, and the four of them were covering all the necessary parts like so well, but they were also really free and jamming, and they were laughing, and like, it was amazing. I mean, and by the end of the show, like Tweedy had, like, you could tell he was like losing his voice, you know, he's screaming over everything, and the band came down and they did this very, very quiet California Stars, and it was just an incredible performance. I mean, like, they left such a huge impression on me, both their records, but then seeing how they reinvented themselves live too, and how they were super in the moment was pretty extraordinary, like, pretty real, and super raw.
That's so cool.
But listening to them a couple weeks ago, we were driving around, it gets to that bridge after I think the second verse of I'm Trying to Break Your Heart. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
I turned to Annie and I was like, this sounds like Fred Armisen doing like a Wilco impression. I couldn't believe how, like, it was I just, you know, you got to pick the right time to put meaningful music on. And I think I just picked the wrong time.
Right.
So we listened to a few songs, and Clarabelle's like, this is boring. Turn this off. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, agree with her right now. Like, I'm not ready to dive back in.
Yeah.
But then this morning, it's like pouring raining up here, and I'm taking Clara to school, and I put it on, and she's like, Daddy, what's this? And I'm like, oh, this is a band called Wilco, and this is a record called Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, and it meant a lot to me when I was in college, and I haven't listened to it in a while since. And it really just washed over me in this incredible, beautiful way where I was like hearing it for the first time again. And lyrics like, my lies are only wishes, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. These like really amazing moments were just, I don't know, Technicolor again. And it was amazing. I'm so psyched to talk about this record.
That's so awesome to hear. So many things I want to talk about there. But the first thing that comes to mind is I'm so glad to hear you talk about not necessarily the context, but just the moment, just not being ready for it, or just hearing something so differently in the moment, even across maybe a week or a few days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because when I talked to Dan, we were talking about Soundgarden, and for some reason it triggered a memory where I heard the song Spoon Man, and when that record first came out, and I'm totally derailed, but this is sort of like justifying my thought process there. There was just a moment after that had come out in the 90s, and I liked the record and I liked the song and it was a hit. At some point I listened to it and I was like, this is the dumbest song I've ever heard in my life. It viscerally struck me like, oh, I hate this. This song is terrible. And I've only heard it a handful of times since then, but it never struck me that way again. I didn't think like, oh, this is great or anything, but it didn't strike me as like, it made me mad, you know? And so that's always kind of been in my head. What was happening in me that made that happen at that point, because I couldn't get back to it. Just the way you're feeling or your own personal context affecting your listening to music is interesting to me. So
definitely
cool to hear you say that.
I think you have to be like ready to receive art of any kind, or let it catch you off guard, and sort of you have to like submit to it in a way that if you're expecting something from it, it might not give you that. It might be this sort of like a a false experience or something, like where you're expecting something, you're imagining it being there, and you're trying to make yourself feel something. You're trying to like manipulate your emotions.
Right.
And I don't know, the moments where records have really grabbed hold of me have been the times when I sort of let the music do the work, let it get to me in a way, you know, like give into it. Instead of expecting something from it, you know?
That's interesting. Are there records, though, like your favorites that you will go to because you know they're going to do something for you? Or do you think even with your most favorite, most known records that you still have to kind of be willing, that it's not just an automatic thing that you'll put it on and suddenly it'll like center you?
It's so hard to know if I manufactured that or if it's real, like a memory,
Right.
or you know what I mean? Like the more you remember a memory, the more you're coloring that memory with the moment that you're in. Like
Yes.
music's the same way. So like, you know, I discovered Astral Weeks when I was 15 or something, and it was lifeblood, you know? And then whenever I needed comfort, that record would be there for me.
Yeah.
And I have a, you know, the only place I have a CD player anymore is in the car, but we keep that in the 6 CD carousel in the car. That's always in there, you know? And every time it comes on, just the sound of that like maraca and the nylon string guitar and the kind of like very chatty bass and stuff, it always calms me down, always centers me. But I don't know. Maybe that's just because of the memories I attach it to, you know?
I think that's part of it. Yeah. Just talking for this podcast about, this is probably the latest record I've talked about so far. Usually it's stuff from the mid 90s, high school kind of stuff.
The stuff that we had originally tossed around were those kinds of records. Yeah.
Right. I'm glad to be expanding the time frame. But point being is that just talking about listening to records over and over and over, like I used to do. I don't know. It feels like most people that I know don't listen to records in the same way as they would in the past with putting in a CD and letting it be there for a week or a month or a tape. So the sense of place, like you talking about Astral Weeks reminds me of Kid A for me. There's certainly older records, but it was a particular point in college when I got that record, and I just listened to it so much when I first got it that when I hear those first notes on the roads or whatever, it brings me back to that dorm room of college, and yeah, it calms me down because there's such a context for it, and I can enjoy the music on its own, but it brings with it just more feelings, more kind of hits the senses more, I think, somehow because of those memories.
Yeah. That's probably a time too where you were sort of emotionally raw and like ready to receive that music. So it does kind of make this like, you know, it tattoos itself on you in a way, you know?
Yes. And so going back to Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, it hit me at a point where I had just moved back to Louisville after going to college in St. Louis, and I was starting to study music. I had taken lessons and things before that, but when I first went to college, I wasn't actually in a music program, so I wasn't doing any kind of orchestral stuff or anything like that, or actual like theory classes and everything. So it hit me right at a transitional period in the way I was listening to music and learning about music. So it felt particularly rich and experimental as a record to me, I think, because of how textural it is. I was playing in sort of like Fugazi inspired post-punk, so, you know, polyvinyl kind of bands in college. And so it was a transitional period to thinking more about what you could do, not just with songwriting and everything, but in making a record. The possibilities of not just like, oh, you make a record in a day, you have all these songs and you go in and you play them and you capture them the best that you can. So, I mean, I guess we could jump right in. The introduction to this record, I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, is a long song, and it takes a while. When I'm thinking of track one, side one songs, this is one that stands out for me. I guess it's a record I've listened to a lot over the years, but it really feels like an introduction to what the record's going to be in a very strong way to me because the record feels pretty experimental, very textural, and it starts in that way to me. Even listening now, I hadn't really processed that before, I think, but listening to it now, it makes a lot of sense. It feels like a strong opener for the record.
It's like a sonic montage of things to come. It's like the trailer in a way.
Right.
I wonder, it's funny, I was talking about it with Clarabelle, my daughter, on the way to school this morning, because we were listening. She was asking me what was special about the music. And I was like, I think it has a special quality because it's like somebody's handing you the puzzle pieces. You know what I mean? Like it's a little deconstructed, you know, and you kind of have to put it together as you go. And I think that there's also something about this. It feels like the music's being written from the subconscious in a way. And I feel like there's this like thing that Tweedy seems to be in touch with his interior in this way. And I wonder if it's something, I'm just sort of riffing, but like about being in the middle of the country, about being in the interior of the country. I don't know if there's some sort of parallel there, but to be like between these two coasts, you know, and to be in the middle, he does seem to be like, I don't know, at the center of his conscious in this way. It's really honest and vulnerable, but it's also kind of like bird in hand. He gives it to you in a way, and then it's yours. And you're like, whoa, okay, now I feel this way too, you know? And there's so many like interior melodies and interior hooks. Nothing is on top ever. It's always like these like inside hooks in that record.
Right.
These little guitar lines, these like little like whirly flourishes and stuff. The only song I think that maybe like doesn't do that as much as Jesus, etc., which is probably either that or Reservations are probably my favorite songs on the record, but I like the whole record.
Yeah.
Camera's really good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they all feel like songs you can really get into, dig into. Maybe Heavy Metal Drummer's a little goofy, but not in the way that some of their songs as they've gone on are.
You know, it's funny. I was expecting that song to hit, and I was like, how am I going to feel when this song hits, you know? Heavy Metal Drummer. I was so moved by it listening to it this morning.
Oh.
I felt like I feel when I hear like a Pavement song that in my memory is goofy, but then I hear it and I'm like, you know, like Cut Your Hair or something, you know, and I hear it now, I'm like so moved by it. And I remember all the words and I'm like living in it. And I felt that way about Heavy Metal Drummer. I felt like there is something goofy about it, but that's only because it's very real, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a put on at all. I think it sounds super genuine to me. I got to say, I wish that Annie and I saw that movie about this record when it came out.
Yep.
And part of me wishes I hadn't seen it because I kind of colored that record for a while and, you know, these specific conflicts and stuff like that. And it was really nice to just listen to the music this morning and forget all that stuff, actually.
Right. I was thinking about all of this because I saw that movie a few times too. I was so swept up in the story of it and everything when it came out. I couldn't believe, you know, that the same, you know, both labels were subsidiaries of Warner and just how it kind of worked out and the sort of outrage of how could you not see that this record's a work of genius and haha, it came back on you in such a perfect way because Warner ended up paying for it twice. So I agree that it did add a lot of context to the whole thing. But it also, I was thinking about how Jeff Tweedy, his voice is kind of the through line of the whole record. And that's probably pretty obvious. That's probably how it works with a lot of records. I mean, it's the same singer on most records throughout all the songs. But these songs really, they change sounds and textures and stuff pretty drastically throughout the whole record, which is awesome. But I think it probably feels so coherent because his sort of voice and personality stays, I want to say so consistent. I think that's right. I mean, it's not like he's singing the same song the whole time, but I feel like the movie showed me that that was genuine somehow, because if someone sings really, I am an American, it sounds like kind of bummed or like this sort of, if you see that person looks like that guy, he lives like that guy. I don't know him, obviously, but just the more I see from him or hear from him, that context makes it feel really genuine. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I didn't know this person at all, or he didn't look like that, or he seemed to have a totally different lifestyle, it would really seem like an effect for someone to sing in that sort of like downhearted way.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I think that's what kicked me out of it when I tried to jump back into it a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. It is a real like kick in the can kind of bummed out tone, not an inspired tone.
Right.
But I think there's an inconsistency in the way he's singing throughout the record, and maybe that comes from recording the record over time. I noticed that making records with people, like they settle into a character over the course of, a few days recording or something, and then they have to sometimes find that character again when you take a break and come back in the studio a month later or something. Like, where were we? What were we doing, And I feel that way on this record. I actually, like, if you were to listen to, like, Tweedy's voice on that, even those first couple tracks, and then you listen to this, just like the tone of his voice on Heavy Metal Drummer or Ashes of American Flags. I don't even think it's like the key or anything, or I'm the Man Who Loves You. Mm-hmm. It's not the same dude. It sounds different to me. Like it's a different character, I think. It's like somebody going into rehab or something. The beginning is so beat up. And then there's like this sort of like climbing out of it. And then there's these like, again, these sort of confessions at the end. But it's like, man, the end is so beautiful. That long ambient passage with the really compressed piano chords and the like tom-toms and just the sparkly stuff around it that goes on after Reservations. Man, it's so good.
I'd sort of forgotten about that part.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so
it's great.
Spectral and cool. When we moved to Brooklyn in 2002, we moved like right off Tillery Street into this loft space there. It was the noisiest block I've ever been on, let alone lived in. And like, it was because the Manhattan Bridge led off right there onto the corner of Tillery and Flatbush Avenue. And then you had the BQE entrance right there also, next to a fire department, police department, and a women's shelter. And it was like surrounded by the projects right there.
That was like right where Balthrop rehearsed?
So right near
Castle Anthrax?
Yep, right near Castle Anthrax. And then we moved to Duffield Street right across from that, which was even closer to that rehearsal space. And when we moved to Duffield, we started seeing Jim O'Rourke around our block a lot. And we realized that he lived on that block. And I would see him late at night at like the bodega and stuff. And this one night, I saw him there and I said hi. I was like, hey, are you, hey, I'm a little nerd. Are you Jim O'Rourke? And he was like, and he like kind of looks over at me and looked like a little wobbly and like maybe like a little drunk. And he was buying this like big sandwich and like 3 packs of American Spirits. And he was like, he looks at me and just goes, I've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner here. And he's like holding up his packs of cigarettes. And I was like, okay, really like your work, And he's like, I bet you think I ruined Wilco.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what to say to you at all, actually.
He's just walking around saying that to people.
It may have been his line at the time. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of his work. I think he's just an incredible producer and musician. And I love those mixes. The mixes really hold up on that record, I think.
Yeah. I want to go back to just an intro, like a first track of a record, and just kind of what thought goes into that. Because a lot of times when I'm listening, I don't think of the sequencing process as coming later, like I think of it as like, oh, what a smart intro track for the record, as if they were like just recording the record start to finish.
As if it's a gig.
Right.
And it's a set list.
Yeah. Definitely that, because I've wondered this record and A Ghost Is Born, the next one, it really feels like the second to last track sort of gets to this, it feels like a set list to me, and it feels maybe kind of intentional that A Ghost Is Born has like a super long noise thing at the end of the second to last song, and it goes on for 10 15 minutes or whatever. But on this record, the Poor Places just has that sort of voiceover thing, and the band gets huge, and it feels like, you know, almost orchestral crescendo, and then drop off into that final song that feels like sort of the encore song or the send 'em home, step away from the mic sort of song. But anyway, so for the first song, since I've also been listening to records that you've made recently, I just kind of want to get your take on that, how much thought goes into that, or if there is any prior thought. Like, so the Muzz record, the first song just kicks right in. There's no, like, I think as an overall track, it sets a mood for the record, but there's not that musical moment of sort of setting a tone or easing in or introducing you to the experience of listening to this record in a gradual way. And then so the other one that I've been listening to a lot lately is the Bonny Light Horseman record, and it does take some time for the vocals to come in, but that one does feel like an easing in to the song itself and to the record itself, but it's not introducing this sort of like experimental nature. I'm not trying to make a comparison necessarily. It's just this idea of how you choose a first track. I love how that it sets a mood from a feeling standpoint. That one, I think, to me, like, it's really nice to just get into the vibe of what's happening in that song, and it seems to carry over to the record for me. Whereas Wilco's introducing all these sounds and textural stuff that is also going to apply to the record. But it feels like three different successful ways of starting an album. And it just, you having produced a lot of records and that being your work, what thought goes into that? Or is it something you discover later?
I definitely have thoughts when I'm working on a record. If I get to a song and I feel like, oh man, I want to hear this right away. This is the first song on the record, you know? But it's often a collaborative process coming up with the sequence, and particularly that first jam. With the Bonny record, much of that record is all just people in a room just playing together, and the vocals are live and the instruments are bleeding into each other's mics, and everybody's sitting really close to each other and not playing with headphones on and stuff. So that's a whole vibe and a whole kind of landscape of textures that I think lives throughout the record, like you described already. And so it felt kind of cool to kind of wade in those waters for a while at the beginning of the record. But also that record is called Bonny Light Horseman, and that's the title track. Bonny Light Horseman is the first song on that album, and the name of our band is Bonny Light Horseman. So we just really liked the three of that. And I think we were just, we just liked how direct it was, you know? Yeah. It's like you look at the album, it's just a horse's head, and then the first song is Bonny Light Horseman, and the album is called Bonny Light Horseman, and the band is called Bonny Light Horseman. We just liked how simple it was. Yeah. First song, first side, first record. Although I guess it's not really a thing with Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, because it's their, fourth album or fifth album?
Fourth, yeah, I think. It feels like sort of a new, like a rebirth of the band, kind of.
It sounds like a new band at that point. What does he say? I'd die if I could come back new, or something like that. Yeah. And that album feels that way. Like, that feels like the whole album to me. Yeah. Although the first Wilco album I had was Being There, and that one's hard for me to listen to now, but I loved it so much when it came out. And then what really knocked me over was the Mermaid Avenue stuff. And I thought about the Mermaid Avenue stuff a lot when I was making the Bonny Light Horseman record, because of sort of the recontextualizing text with new music and stuff. Yeah. So that whole era of their career is just fascinating to me, the way they kind of ping-ponged around all those different sounds and those different records that are like really bold records. Right. And I think more ambitious than a lot of what in hindsight we call Americana now. You know, I don't know. They were like kind of an underground phenomenon then.
Yeah.
They didn't have the sort of grisly Nashville stereotype of Americana, you know?
Yeah, it was interesting to hear you talk about seeing them at the Bowery Ballroom, because my first introduction to them, I guess I knew who they were, and I say Being There was the first record I had because I remember having the CD, but it feels like I really got into who they were maybe with this record. Mm-hmm. I don't remember thinking of them as a band that I could maybe see up that close, like at the Bowery Ballroom. I first saw them in, I think, 2005 at the Palace Theater in Louisville.
Oh, cool.
So it was so awesome. My Morning Jacket opened, and
oh, that must have been a really amazing bill in that town at that time. Yeah,
My Morning Jacket started early. I almost missed the start of their set because I hadn't sat down yet, and every concert I've ever been to of that size starts late, at least 10 minutes, and they started like 10 minutes early, I think, just so they could play a little bit longer. And they started with Prince's song I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man, and the energy was just off the charts. It was such a perfect choice to just make the place explode for 3 hours. And they came back out with Wilco at the end and played Don't Fear the Reaper, which is ridiculous, but so fun. But so Wilco they felt like a band that I would see from just sort of that distance, a band at that different level. So that sounds so cool to see them just kind of sweaty 4-piece at the Bowery.
Man, it was so cool. But and then I caught them again a couple years later when they were coming around at Radio City with the big band with like Nels Cline and stuff, and that was just amazing. I went with my friend Mike Phillips. You know Mike Phillips. Yeah. Mike and I went. It was really fun. But I remember already at that point, I remember looking around and being like, oh, wow, it's like, I'm like one of the younger people here. It's like Wilco's a band for old people or something. Like already thinking that before people started calling it like dad rock and stuff, Right. And I remember feeling kind of funny. Like we went to like a grown-up bar before the show and people had like expensive beers and stuff. Yeah. And I was just working at a coffee shop, and like, you know what I mean? Everyone else had like real jobs and stuff. Everyone was like kind of coming in their like work clothes. Right. And I remember thinking like, fuck, I don't fit in here. You know what I mean?
Right. That's funny, actually, to think of it happening at that time, because I think that's part of the whole rebirth feeling with this record, is that this was a point in their career where they could have reached back and grabbed younger people. Mm-hmm. I mean, it did for me.
I think it did.
Feels like.
I think that's true. Yeah. I think it did. Yeah.
Maybe from then on, they probably haven't had another one of those. They've truly become dad rock.
Dad rock, yeah. I mean, it was amazing. Like the most dad rock moment I've ever had actually was Annie and Clara and I were at Newport a few years ago. We had a gig, and Clarabelle was with us. The great thing about Newport Folk Festival, well, many, many great things about Newport Folk Festival, but is how early of a gig it is. It starts at 11 in the morning and it's done by 7. Yeah. So you can take your kids. It's amazing, So we were there and we were hanging out in like the quad, and then we heard like just the best sounding music. We were like, what is that amazing sounding music? And then we were like, oh shit, it's Wilco. And they're playing on the main stage. So I put Clarabelle on my shoulders and I like walk out into the audience, and I walk right up to the front, just like at Bowery Ballroom, with my brother. Yeah. And she's on my shoulders, and Nels is just like, the guitar's going to like jump out of his hands, and it's just so cool. And it was just magic, and everyone like around us was just feeling it. And it was so, so great. And they deliver. I mean, they're still like the best band. They're so good. Yeah, he found guys like Glenn and Nels, they're such good players, and they do so much other stuff outside of Wilco that in a way they sort of feel like hired gun type dudes that you get to a certain level and then you can have in your band. But it's managed to keep a real band feeling as well, and not just like, I showed up to play the gig. Right. It feels like every record after this, maybe they just sort of leaned into that. Not necessarily like layered, take months to make an album kind of stuff. It's just that we're great. We play great together. Let's just do that.
Sky Blue Sky I love, but this record and the next one, Ghost is Born, feel like the sort of peak of what they were doing. And this one feels so layered and studio to me. And then the first song on A Ghost is Born, and they didn't have Nels yet, but it's such a striking band in the room moment that I think of all the time with Jeff's guitar playing. You know the song I'm talking about, At Least That's What You Said. It's just like a quiet couple minute intro, it's solo, and then the band comes in, and they play that thing, and Jeff goes off, and it feels like such a awesome band in a room, just expressing themselves moment.
Yeah.
Such a transition from
Hummingbird is on that record, right?
Yeah.
That song is an amazing song.
I know.
The guitar playing on that is really cool too.
Yeah.
I mean, Jeff Tweedy's guitar playing is awesome. It's like it comes from such a visceral, cool place. It's got that kind of like Neil Young abandon that I think is just one of my favorite sounds. But you know what's interesting is that like when I hear Jeff to it, I don't want to go ahead and like, okay, so this is something, do you know Jamal Rue?
Yeah.
Oh man, he would be a great guy to do this with.
Oh, cool. Great.
One thing that Jamal said to me once when I was working at a record store in New Paltz, he came in, I don't know what I had on, but he was like, oh man, this sounds like Prince, and now I just want to listen to Prince. It's like,
right.
Some people do something and it's so evocative of another thing that you just go, oh man, I just want the real thing. I don't want I don't want this version of what I already like. I want the thing I like, you know?
Yep.
And then there's another level where clearly you couldn't have what Jeff Tweedy is doing on the guitar without Neil Young.
Right.
And yet when I hear Tweedy do it, I just want to listen to him do it. I don't want to go ahead and like reference what he's referencing.
Yeah.
Because the quality is high and it sounds like real and raw and played with the band in the way it should, you know? So, yeah, It's interesting.
That's interesting to hear as a guitar player, because that moment's not on this record, but...
Actually, there are moments. Heavy Metal Drummer has those moments, I think, right?
Yeah, I think you're... That's true.
All that stuff?
Yeah.
Did you get that?
Oh, and,
I'll do it really loud into my mic so you have
Also, I'm the Man Who Loves You.
Oh, maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. That's what
yeah. You're right. That is really cool. I guess I was just thinking like an extended sort of guitar feature.
Yeah.
Just that expression. But so the song Radio Cure has, I mean, textures in these songs are changing quite a bit the whole time, but there's a kick drum sound going through it the whole way that feels like where my mind went was, wow, this is really a studio piece. Like this sounds really nice, and there's no way that you could really create this, especially the size band they are, in the sort of like theaters, or not stadiums, but in sort of rooms they were playing. It would have to be like a Carnegie Hall or something to sort of try to recreate the sounds of this. And I didn't go watch like a live performance of the song. I'm sure they just kind of recontextualized it a little bit, and I'm sure it works fine. But it made me wonder about production stuff where, do you ever think about the live performance? Like, say you've worked with the Hold Steady and stuff, a band that clearly they're going to go play these songs in a set of music that they already have that's rocking, and it's a particular context. Do you ever think about how something's going to be able to translate? Not necessarily you, or do you ever deal with that talking to the band that you're producing? Or does that ever feel like a factor when you're recording a record, or do you try to really separate and make it the best thing that it can be in the recording process and then have them worry about that later?
Mm-hmm. I think my feelings on this have changed a lot over time. Like, I think when I was younger, it was this sort of militant, it's only as good as it sounds. Let's, by any means necessary, by hook or by crook, get this sounding cool.
Yeah.
And I don't feel that way anymore. I feel like I want it to come from the person that I'm producing. I want it to come from them, and I want to follow that narrative and that thread. So if if somebody's coming in, if it's a band, say, like to use your example, the Hold Steady, when I've worked with them, I've now made 2 records with them. Tad and Craig will come over to my studio and I'll hear some early kind of song fragments and stuff, and we'll go through and we'll sort of like decide which songs seem to have the most potential or we're all most excited about, and make some like small kind of demo recordings to send to the rest of the guys. And they'll do the same. Steve Silvage, who is the other guitar player in that band, he and Tad are both very different and very amazing musicians. And so Steve will send pretty fleshed out demos so everybody can kind of like get inside an idea. Franz, the piano player, same thing. And I'd say those are like the sort of principal writers. It's usually like Craig and Tad will write something. They've been playing together for so long, you know. And then other ideas will come from the other guys in the band. Anyway, then we'll get in a room together and they'll play through the ideas, you know, and it'll be like Galen and Bobby in the rhythm section, Franz, Tad and Steve, piano, 2 guitars, and then Craig sometimes will also play guitar, but mostly just sing. And it's loud. Those rehearsals are loud. Like I go in my earplugs, like, and they're playing like they're playing to like a huge, you know, gig, like how they normally play, you know. They've got like multiple amps and there's just like, it's loud in there. And I think that does something to the process by really kind of putting it in their hands. And I'll help direct traffic, you know, and occasionally play along if there's something that I hear or they want something a little bit, or they want something to come from someone else. But it's them, you know, it's their band. And that's when we record them in a room live and, you know, they're doing their thing. Whereas it's different when an artist comes in and is like, I want to make a record with you. And it's like this collaborative thing of, you know, like Craig, I mean, you could even go within that band, and there's a good example, you know, like Craig, when we make his solo records, you know, we get in a room, usually with another musician. It's usually been Joe Russo, and the 3 of us will sit in a room together, and I'll either play piano or play guitar, and, you know, Craig will sing, and we'll play the songs down. And those are much different records. Those are like, you know, more process, less performative, I guess. I feel a lot less ownership than I once did, I think, with music in general. I feel like way more open. I think when I was younger, there was like this desire to have my voice heard or something like that, and I didn't really know how to control it at all. And I think it was just a lot of nervous energy. But I feel more comfortable now with letting things go. So oftentimes what that means is just trying to capture the feeling of the songs the best way possible. And sometimes that's live off the floor, and sometimes that's, you know, building things piece by piece. And everybody's different. Some people come in and they're like, my song's done, and they have like 1 chord and a groove or something, or someone's like, my song's done, and they have a Pro Tools session, but they don't remember how they made it, or like, my song's done, and they can sit down and play it on piano and sing you the whole thing, and it's like amazing, you know. And so everybody comes in with a different both expectation of what they want out of the process. So for me, that just means I have to be flexible, I think, and be open to what's coming to me, and not have an expectation about specifically what I want to do with it before I even get in the room, you know?
Yeah. That's cool to hear you say that, because we know each other and we've played together and stuff, that I think about the production process more. I think when I'm listening to records that you've produced, I think about your experience, and I wonder about these things. So I love hearing you talk about that, and somewhere processed along the way that you must be having the experience of having to let go a little more as you work more and more on really big records that you're fully producing, or records that it's a band that you're, like you said, directing traffic, just the different experiences and learning to kind of let go, as you said. I think I sort of process that you must be going through that. And also I've been around when you've done some like really hands-on kind of production stuff with people's songs, and then also less, just exactly as you're describing. So I wanted to ask you about this, and it has nothing to do with this record, but when we worked on Caitlin Demaray's first solo record, the My Magic City record, and we were in that cabin together with Kaya and Caitlin and Laura. It feels like an early time for me working with a producer. Kaya was kind of engineering, but also doing a production role. And I remember just having a sort of light bulb moment of how she was so positive, just how the vibe, and I think it came from everyone because Caitlin's so warm. We're all friends. It felt like she was like the caretaker of the vibe. And even at times where I felt like it was not so great of a take, and she would say, "You guys are amazing. This is blowing my mind every single time." I would think, I'm not sure I totally believe that, but I like what's happening here because it's seeping into me whether I resist it or not, that great things are happening.
Yeah.
And so it felt like a moment where it really hit home that sort of positive vibe is so important regardless of what else is happening.
Oh my God.
And it can really make a difference.
I totally agree. Yeah. Kaya I feel like she was such an early mentor in that way. And I think back to that session all of the time. I'm so glad you brought it up. The tracking live, very close to each other, the feeling in the room, even down to like Caitlin making soup for everyone. Like there's something
totally.
I feel like when you're making or with that record, what making that record showed me was so much of life, it comes at you like a storm, and you can't really you have no control over it whatsoever, and it's disorienting, and it's not what you wanted, and you have to deal with it. And I think that collaborating on music in that way, you're able to kind of move the pieces around and manipulate emotions in a positive way where you kind of have some control over it, and it's amazing. And when you can find a group of people to sort of collaborate with on that, I don't know, it enhances the way you think about the process of what it is that you do and why you do it, and the community aspect of it, and I don't know, the idealism, I guess, that you can kind of put on it.
Yep.
That doesn't really have a space in the real world.
Right.
And it makes sense that music is something you can't touch, you know what I mean? And you can only feel it. Yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, that session was just such a special moment. I agree. Yeah, My Magic City.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you can, in a way, hear that vibe in the music, but maybe that's why people put out some documentary type stuff about record making and everything, because sometimes it feels like you can't really convey the warmth of, and making a record, you're going to feel closer to it than somebody that's listening to it in general. Of course, you're just going to know more about it and feel more about what goes in. But just hearing you talk about it, it made me think, gosh, how do you convey all those feelings? I mean, it goes into the music. It's something that made me think of with this podcast of like, you have to listen to music so many times to really get, I feel like, to really get deep into like just the minutia. You may never know how the people were feeling together, but there's so much in there, right?
So much in there. And I think that, like, I guess back to what you were saying, though, it's like there is no way to really convey it beyond just knowing that you feel great about it and sort of just letting it go. I guess if you think back to that time and making that record, we were all so excited about having been there, to hear those songs come out of Caitlin, and like knowing her and Kaya's background with Rainer Maria was really special, and how that band had just ended right as we were starting that music. It felt like something new. Like we were making some really strong roots, And I think it's true.
Yeah.
Like, the music Caitlin went on to create, the music Kaya went on to create, the music Lara went on to create, you and I, like, it all kept growing, It never stopped growing.
Yep.
That was like a really That was a really beautiful time. And it had like a magic, otherworldly quality. It was like snowing outside, wasn't it? We were kind of like all like in this like little warm place, and all playing together.
Perfectly titled, My Magic City.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
And I loved what you said about control too, but that's something I have to remind myself when I'm getting into the details, especially recording and stuff, is that's one thing that I can control is my reaction in between takes, or just convey to people, whether I'm struggling for a part or I think it could be better. I can still control that I'm putting out that sort of positivity. I think that can only help. It's good to not be naive about it and to express if there's things to work on or improve, but I hadn't really thought of it that way, and thanks for saying it that way. I want to talk lyrics, and you've already brought some things up, how some lines really hit home on this record. You've already mentioned a few of them, but I don't know if I had thought about it in the past, but now just this sort of idea that I keep coming back to of like textural and exploration and experimental, the lyrics seem to fit that way with me a little bit. Like the first line is, I am an American aquarium drinker. And I think back in the day, I was like, what does he mean? As if there's like a very specific meaning that he has that I need to find, you know? And now it's just, that sounds cool. There's an image there, and I don't know what that image shows me necessarily, but it brings me into some sort of world where he's doing something and I have an image in my head. But it also, there's just rhythm there, and American aquarium, it's playful. This sort of avenue of thinking about the lyrics is something that feels newer to me, just sort of a rediscovery upon listening to this record closely for the first time in several years.
Yeah. I like the I assassin down the avenue. Like, I love the way he follows lines up in this song.
Yeah. Yeah, but what is that? I mean, does that...
I don't know. I guess like I imagine...
It sounds cool.
It sounds cool. I also imagine like a unreliable narrator kind of like walking down the street, kind of like glaring at people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. More of a feeling, right? But just like being in a world.
Yeah.
More than like, I derive this from this statement.
Yeah, I think he's just, I don't know what he's doing, but it's cool. He's setting something up. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's beautiful though. And I think also it's like whatever it's doing, it's drawing you in deeper instead of pushing you away. And I think that like that's something with lyrics that's like you can so easily kick someone out. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people are like, "Oh man, I love this song. I don't know what they're singing, but like I love this song." It's so interesting. You could love a song, not know what they're saying. But I think that what they really mean when people say that is like, I'm not kicked out emotionally here. Whatever is happening, I don't need to look more into it because I'm okay with whatever it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes repetition of something does that. The more you say something, the more you think about it, the more it means, the more meanings you kind of associate with it.
Yep.
So when he says, I'm trying to break your heart, like over and over again, like you're wondering like, I really want to like it. Now I guess I got to think about that now. I mean, I have no other choice, you know?
Right.
And I guess, you know, so there's sometimes when that's okay and sometimes when it's not and you just hit skip, you know what I mean? Like, but I think that this is definitely one of those records where it's like, I can't just throw it on any old time.
Okay.
Like I said originally, like, you know, like it'll turn into like a Weird Al song in my head or something if I throw it on at the wrong time. Whereas if it's like, I'm ready to receive it and I'm feeling open, it's really stunning. Also, I guess like there's so much said about the architecture of those buildings on the cover and the ashes of American flags and all that was happening kind of right when this album came out, you know, that foreshadowed, you know, what was going on with the World Trade Center and the attacks and stuff like that. It's like, it's kind of hard not to mention that when you talk about this record, because that was just like an unfortunate coincidence.
Right. I guess some people thought that that's what it was about and didn't realize that it was clearly recorded and written before.
Well before that, yeah.
I think that it's just such an intense time in life for people that we were, of an adult age or a child, it just is aware of it for anyone that was conscious of it. When it happened, that it's hard not to maybe look for it or be coping with that when you're experiencing any kind of art. I remember there was a Fugazi song I was listening to back at the time about like letters being sent that never made it, or something that felt like it was related to that. And I'm not sure, in hindsight, I think it's a big stretch, but it was just where my mind was, that anything that sort of seemed to relate just kind of brought that up.
That's how music and songs work, though, right? Like they find a way in, and you kind of put them in a spot in your imagination where they then kind of live and grow from there.
Yeah.
It's weird. Music does that for me more than any other thing.
Yep. I hadn't really thought about the two towers until I was just reading just in the last several days a little bit of like the older reviews of this record and stuff. That cover was sort of textural for me back in the day. And then I realized they were the buildings in Chicago, but I just sort of missed the idea that it was two buildings next to each other, and it came out at that time.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful photo. And like when the record came out, when I first heard it, and I was like 21 or something, like I hadn't been to Chicago yet. I hadn't really spent much time in the Midwest. It just seemed like it might as well be Tokyo or something. Like I was just like, I don't know what this is, but it's captured my imagination.
Right. And that, going back to the lyrics, that seems to be sort of the thing. I mean, they are captivating in a way that is not totally clear or literal. And so, yeah, lines like "I'm trying to break your heart" seem to sort of jump out at times when there's this sort of collage. You're getting these sort of like vaguer images being brought in, as you say. But then when there's like a repeated line or a line that is clearer like that, it does seem to hit home. That seems to be the effect.
Totally. Yeah.
There's one point, and I must bring this up a lot because there was a point where I was talking to Anthony LaMarca about Jeff Tweedy like a year ago, and I started to bring this up somehow because we were talking about his record, and he knew exactly what I was going to say. So I was like, oh crap, I say this too much. But the line in Ashes of American Flags that I can spend $3.53 or whatever it is on Diet Coca-Cola and unlit cigarettes.
Yeah.
That took me out of it.
That kicks me out.
Back then and now too, I'm like, I hear it and it's like if I'm zoomed in the world of the record, then I'm out of it and I'm looking at the record as this piece of art. I've been totally kicked out, and I'm like thinking of the songwriting process, the production process, the whole thing of like he needed an extra couple syllables there, and that's what he found to put there, and no one called him on it. And it bothers me. It takes me out every time.
Same.
Because I think that is so unnecessary.
Same.
I'm glad to hear that from you. I kind of knew that you would feel the same.
I feel exactly that way. Oh my God. I feel exactly that way.
I'm so glad I brought it up because I knew you of all people would feel the same about that one. Most people, I mean, who cares in some ways, but I care that much.
I notice.
I can tell when that happens.
Yeah. I know. It feels lazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say. I mean, he's clearly not a lazy guy. I mean, I don't know him at all, but he's one of the greats.
Of course, anything critical is because I'm really trying to
totally
delve in, as you know.
But I think the process like wears itself there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like even Bob Dylan has that song called "Wiggle, Wiggle, Wiggle." You know. So, but there's lines like "Tall buildings shake, voices are scared, singing sad, sad songs." Like you're listening to that, and all you see on TV for the next 5 years is that loop of the towers crumbling. Like,
how did that happen? It's amazing.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, what kind of magic happened that he wrote that song not long before it happened? Yeah.
Skyscrapers are scraping together. That's crazy.
Right.
It's amazing.
What in the world. Yeah. I watched him just during quarantine, just this year, play that song solo for a late show or something, and so beautiful. And he's just right there on the screen, and so I thought, oh, this is an easy chance to just learn this song. I can see him playing it, and so I just learned. It's been a nice one to just being around the house, just sort of strum that song or play it for Rowan or something. And I had to get that one lyric moment in.
That's the one that kicks me out. Yeah. Is there another one on the record that kicks you out?
Not really. The other one in the same song that I've just thought about it more often than the other ones maybe is, and this is super nitpicky, but and maybe I'm just missing something, is, I love I'd like to salute the ashes of American flags, but then all the fallen leaves filling up shopping bags. And I realized that I was always picturing garbage bags out on that's what people have the leaves. And
yeah.
I'm in Nashville right now. You see that leaves everywhere and they're filling up garbage bags. That's always what I pictured. And at some point over the years, I realized, wait, he's saying shopping bags. What does that mean? Is that intentional or not? Is he saying that these leaves are in shopping bags and that's something I should reckon with? Or was that a sort of lazier, not lazy necessarily, but just,
or just another thing. Who knows? Like, maybe it was garbage bags. He didn't want to say garbage bags there. Maybe he didn't want to say garbage.
Right.
Like shopping bags. I don't know. It's different. Like, you have to like go out of your way to get some garbage bags. Whereas like shopping bags, they're like sitting around.
Yeah.
Leaves are sitting around. Shopping bags are sitting around. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
They accumulate. I don't know.
Right, it's true. And I guess you could put leaves if you have some bigger sort of shopping bags and stuff. Who knows?
Who the fuck knows? Yeah.
It was just something I hadn't thought about. And then at some point I remember realizing, wait a second.
I'll tell you what, Jason, it is funny to look at these songs that are like so famous and in everyone's subconscious and look at the lyrics as if it's your job to edit them.
Is that where your mind went first, looking at them? You kind of want to that's great. I think most people would not do that. I think that
or just have the conversation. Like, I think it's like happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, but I've been sort of surprised that most people are just not totally down for that conversation, or it's just not where it doesn't excite them in the way that it does me.
I don't know. I like talking about it. Paul from Muzz, he'll talk about lyrics and stuff like that. But he's like, I don't know. It's like more fun just to write them and see what if other people feel. And like, there's no right or wrong. It is what it is. And I like that approach. I mean, is that your puppy dog?
Oh, I think that's maybe Rowan. Might be. She's napping, but she's been waking up a little early.
Oh. How's she doing?
Doing great. Yeah, learning a lot of stuff. She's been waking up from her naps the last several days. It's just those constant little worries that I think I talked to you guys about briefly at Threes. One of the last times we were there for one of the benders, just like I was worried about the pacifier or something at that time, and you were like, someone had told you, you know what, it's going to go away. That problem is, it's something to think about, but in 5 years, you're going to have completely forgotten that it was an issue.
Yeah.
Like don't stress.
I've been thinking about that stuff again lately because we're having babies again really soon.
Congratulations.
Annie's pregnant with twins. And so I've been thinking back, Annie and I have been talking about a lot, like just like what, even just like, naps, like, wait, how much do they fucking nap again? Like, what's the deal with that? And you have to stop what you're doing and just like put them down. Like, it's like I did all that. Like, I did it all. And yet I completely erased it because it's useless. You don't need to know any of that. You just need to like manage it when it's happening.
Yep.
But you don't commit it to memory. It's weird that you don't commit it to memory because it's like the biggest thing in your world for years. And then you just just erase it. Don't need any of it. Yeah. Let's talk about weird Jeff Tweedy lyrics instead that for some reason stay in my memory.
I love you guys so much because I feel like, I'm sure you have this with a lot of people because you're just cool people, but I relate to so many things. I feel like because the same thing, like Rowan is only just over a year old, and there are things. I mean, I know Clarabelle's 6, right? Or
she's 6.
Yeah. So I can't even imagine how strange and forgotten that stuff would feel 5 years from now. Because right now I think of, she just kind of goes down at the end of the night. We still have a nighttime routine. We've been pretty militant about her schedule and all that stuff, and it's been great. It's worked awesome. But there are things that like I used to wake up in the middle of the night. She would need a bottle at 3 or 4 a.m. and I would go through this whole thing, and it took her forever to. I would be listening to like an audiobook or something with the lights out, giving her this bottle for like 45 minutes or something. And now she stopped. She's off the bottle, but by the end of the bottle thing, she would do it in like 3 minutes. And the idea that it feels like 10 years ago that she was so small and I was in the dark. I can't really remember it in a way that feels like it was in the last 5 years even. And it was just, she's less than a year old. It was like 6 months ago or 8 or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So strange.
Some of the stuff will come back. Like I'll notice that I'll put on some like piano music or something that I used to play Clara in the middle of the night when she couldn't sleep, when she was like really, really little, and like she'll get quiet or something, you know. I'll be like, oh, this still works because I used to play this for you when you were, you know, a month old, screaming in the middle of the night, and you would stop crying, you know. So some stuff stays with you, I think.
Yeah, we've had a few songs like that too.
Yeah, it's interesting.
She loves Barbara Ann.
Oh, really? By the Beach Boys?
Yeah, for some reason that was just one of the ones that if she was like crying, we could like bop her around and sing. It was easy for us to both just sing that, and then she would smile, and now that still works. Like when she recognizes that song, you know, immediately it's just like
that's her. Really
she's
cute.
She's been trained into that reaction.
That's a really
like,
cute
smile.
song for a little baby to like. Amazing. I guess Brian Wilson was pretty tapped into that sort of childlike wonder.
Totally. Yeah, in some ways it feels kind of like kids' music. Yeah, I feel like we've touched on a lot of things that I mean, we can talk forever about this record, but I feel like...
Is Ken Coomer on this record, or is it all Glenn Cochi?
I think it's all Glenn Cochi. That's my understanding.
Yeah. There's still a lot of Jay Bennett in this record, which I love so much. Were you a Summerteeth fan also?
Yeah, but later. I think I got to that one a little bit later, like exploring the back catalog after having loved.
Man, I loved that record when it came out and was just totally obsessed with it, actually. That was another one where I was just like, I was afraid to listen to it because I didn't want to take things from it, and I'm sure that I've taken a lot from it. And I love Jay Bennett's background vocal parts and his piano playing and his guitar playing. It's amazing, I think. And his playing on that Mermaid Avenue stuff is so expressive and cool. That's a real loss, I think. I didn't know him or anything, but musically I feel like it's a big loss.
Right. Yeah, that was something where the movie was a bummer to think of him in that context, because it kind of... Wasn't there a moment where it showed a little bit of him after being out of the band, kind of playing solo and stuff? I think it sort of painted a little bit of a sad picture. Yeah.
It made you pity him a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like that was...
but he hadn't passed away at that point or anything, so it wasn't... Now it feels heavier now remembering it, but I think at the time it wasn't as heavy.
I don't know. I felt like it made me feel bad.
Yeah, definitely.
It made me feel bad, and it made me like feel like I was at his wake or something.
Yeah.
I actually hated that feeling because I had been such a fan of his.
Right.
I felt like betrayed or something by either the director or the band or something. Again, that's why I wish that I hadn't seen that movie.
Yeah.
Because now I can listen to the music and not think about it, but at the time it colored everything in a way that I was like sort of like kind of bummed by. Like I feel like, I don't know, like I just don't want to know. I just want to hear the music. I don't want to know the other stuff. But I'm also like a fan, so like I'm interested, and like if you give me a little bit, like I'll just like I'll keep going.
Right.
But like I like to just be influenced by the music. But it is like we live in a time when the biographies matter for some reason, you know? We're interested in the whole narrative.
Yeah.
That's like media culture, I think.
Yeah, that's another thing I thought about with this record because of the story of it that we're talking about in the context of 9/11 and everything. And just, I hadn't really thought about the stories to go along with a record until I was putting out one myself and I needed to write things about it. And I was like, oh gosh, I don't stand a chance. Not really, but I just wanted to say just listen, like that's the story. That's the story of the music. I didn't like go live in a cabin and eat whatever I could find for 2 months. Like I didn't, I didn't go to space and this is what, like I'm a guy and I wrote this music and I understand that it's maybe easier to get in to something if you have context going in that that it's about something you can relate to or the person is really cool or strange or interesting.
There's an angle.
Yeah.
There's like a point of view.
Yeah. I understand why that's a selling point. So many people making music, it's easy to miss things or to get lost in the shuffle, I'm sure, but so stand out in any way possible to get ears on your music, but it just feels sort of counter to the idea of just taking the music for what it is.
Definitely. I think some people need the elevator pitch and some people don't. And sometimes it's just a matter of time before music gets discovered. I mean, think of all the people who like probably didn't have an elevator pitch, like Nick Drake or Bill Fay or Emmett Rhodes or I don't know, any of these people. Like they're, now the elevator pitch is nobody paid attention to them when they were around and they made amazing music.
Right.
Now I'm compelled,
Right.
But at the time that wasn't true,
Yeah.
Bert Jansch, just a guy making cool music,
Right. Maybe that's a good transition to talking about kind of what's going on with you. It's interesting to see you be in some bands now. I felt like there was a period where you were producing and playing with people, but not necessarily like a member of bands. So I'm excited for Muzz and Bonny Light Horseman. Are those kind of things like putting out a record as a member of a band now that you've thought more about because of that experience, or you've sort of thought about it all along? Just the stories that go along with it, or this idea of how the music gets out to people.
What I've learned from being in these bands is that when you're in a collaborative band like that, you don't think about it as much. The talking points, you don't focus on them as much because they're not entirely your responsibility. They're more of like the effort and the weight of the group, and therefore it's diffused in such a way that it kind of writes itself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you're getting these different personalities together. It's not like it has to all be like this one person's perspective on it.
Right.
And I think maybe like when a band's working well, you get those different ingredients to kind of balance each other out in such a way that like, the story and the narrative kind of, writes itself a little bit. Because there's characters. Yeah, it's like a character study or something.
These are quote unquote super groups that you're in as well.
Yeah.
So there's story in hearing how people that you already know, at least some people coming to it, I'd say maybe a lot of people coming to it know other music that you guys have worked on. So that's a point of interest in itself, is how you guys collaborate and bring these different personalities that people are already familiar with into a new project.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't know. It's interesting. They're both very different bands, but it's been really rewarding and cool and a good outlet for me creatively, and has helped with my production side of what I do quite a bit, I think.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the collaboration and kind of the volley of ideas that happens when you really respect the people that you're in the room with, and you want to know what they think, and you want to try and build something together. I think for a while I thought that like diplomacy would sort of like water down the overall vision, but I don't feel that way anymore. That's
great. I love both those bands and lots of other stuff you're working on, but I've had the thought with Bonny Light Horseman that at some point when I heard the record, I felt like I was going to open up Spotify one day and see that there were like 997 million listens or something, that like, cause it just feels like such a crossover kind of band that like I could imagine my parents listening to it, just anyone, kids, that it feels cool for any age, but also just would be sonically pleasing and performance wise pleasing for any demographic.
Cool.
I heard it and I was like, this is gonna explode. And it's made me It's just been thinking about like how long are people listening to music when it comes out and how's it getting to people and stuff, because just like the Fiona Apple record came out during quarantine in the last several months, and it felt like maybe just the people I follow on Twitter or whatever, I felt like I was seeing things that were saying this is the greatest record of all time, or and I love it. I think it's awesome, but it felt like that died away within days.
Right.
And I'm sure people were still listening to it, but it just feels different now. There's so much music coming out and stuff that I don't know what it takes for people to hear something and then stick with it,
I wish like sound bites from the Republican Party would die away as quickly as people's accolades of music.
So true.
But with music stuff, I don't know. I guess it's just that there is a lot of great music that comes out all of the time. And I think that because the like commodity of it is less based on, a physical magazine article and a physical record that you have to like spend your money on to get.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's easier to get. So it's easier to forget too. So like,
right.
And that's nothing new. That's just been the way it's, that's how it's been for 20 years now. But like, I guess I'm still stuck in the mindset of information moving a little slower through my perception of it. It kind of lives with me a little bit longer.
Right. I feel the same.
Yeah. But it is interesting, right? Just the cycle of things.
Definitely. I wonder what'll come next. I mean, I think people have been trying ways to have it feel more important with packaging or extra content, or just I think people have been for those 20 years trying to come up with ways to make it. I remember when there was a My Morning Jacket record that you couldn't burn the MP3s onto your computer, and it was like in 2005, and that was when I still bought CDs, but I would quickly put them on my iPod, and I was outraged that I couldn't do that. That one, it was just trying to cope with getting people to actually buy it and not share it. But
anyway. I think that like sort of like festival culture has become trendier and important to people because new music is so fleeting, and that way of sort of getting people's attention is so much more challenging now. But you can't replace the moment shared when you're with people. You're actually standing there. The musicians are making the music right there for each other and for you. That's irreplaceable. And so I think right now what's so difficult about this time in particular is that was sort of like the last vestige of the music industry that we sort of had as musicians, where we kind of had control over that. We're not control in every way, but we had the like ability to be like, let's go out on tour and we can do things, we can do things the way we want them to be done and play the music for people. But right now we don't have that. So now all we have are these records and these album cycles and these sort of press quotes, and it's limiting.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder what we're finding in this time creatively, and I'm sure there's going to be an outpouring once live shows are a thing again. And
there'll be a big bottleneck. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So what about you? What are you working on now? What's coming up? I love the This Is the Kit record that just came out.
That was amazing. They're incredible. Right before quarantine started, I had like 3 records almost done. That was one of them. This Is the Kit. Another one was the record by this band called Mandolin Orange.
Right.
And then another one was a Hold Steady record. So now all those are done, and they're kind of like, they're coming out over the next year. And then I made, in quarantine, started recording some new stuff with Muzz and started writing some new music with Annie. And I produced a Fruit Bats record.
Right.
That's coming out in March. And I did a bunch of overdubs for people, various things. So, that stuff will come out. And then I'm working on a Guster record right now.
Oh,
cool. That band called Guster?
Yeah.
And then working on an Anais Mitchell record coming up next, too.
Great.
Yeah. So those are kind of the projects that are happening right now. Trying to make a new Muzz record too. I'm kind of like halfway into that, and then write some new Bonny Light Horseman stuff as well. So we'll see where all this goes.
That's wonderful. The Muzz and Bonny Light Horseman, did you produce those, or were those more collaborative? Or I didn't actually look at the credits.
The Bonny record I produced, and the Muzz record was a collaborative production between me and Paul and Matt and Dan Goodwin.
Yeah.
D. James Goodwin.
D. James.
D. James. Genius.
Yes. You mentioned writing with Annie. Have you thought of it as for A Nero, or just as you guys are writing and you're not sure what it'll be yet?
I don't know. For Annie and I, it's always been like really easy to make music together, and we've always been plagued by what it should be.
Yeah.
We've never like landed on a moniker that kind of worked for everything that we've done together. So I don't know. It might be an A Nero record. It might be something else. I'm not really sure.
Well, I think you guys, that I've mentioned to her that record, Hysterical Fiction, is one of my favorites. It's one that I think about when there are records that I can just put on and listen over and over and over, and how I used to do that all the time. And most of the records that I talk about on this podcast from a long time ago, that's what happened with them. And part of the reason I started it is just my interest in the fact that I don't really do that. More recently, it's such a combination of things. I could make the choice to do that if I wanted to, but I see benefit in hearing a lot of different music. There's access to so many different things, but that is one that I just always come back to. And once I get started with it, I usually listen to it multiple times, and it's a special record to me. So I'm always curious if there's what you guys are working on together, and if there's going to be more, because I'm a big fan. I'm a fan of all the stuff that you guys have done, but that band in particular I think about a lot because that's just one of my favorite records.
Oh, thanks. We're big fans of you too, Jason. And and the thought of having a year where we don't get to all play Gree together,
I know,
is really one of the more challenging things of this time.
I agree.
Agree.
Gosh, that was not long before we locked it all down.
That was the last show I played.
Wow. I played at LIC Bar on March 9th. That was probably pretty dangerous. I remember being a little afraid, but I was still pretty unsure. I didn't drink anything just because I had no idea what was going on. But I went to the show thinking I'll probably be fine. Yeah, pretty wild. But this has been everything I hoped and more, having you on the show. Josh, thank you so much for doing it.
Thanks, Jason. This is so great. It's such a cool thing you're doing.
Thanks. And, man, congratulations to you guys as well. That's so crazy. I'm excited.
Totally crazy.
That's it. That's the show. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to Josh for doing that. It was a blast to talk to him. Good luck to Josh and Bonny Light Horseman and the whole team at the Grammys. Congrats and best wishes to Josh and Annie on the birth of their twins. Speaking of Bonny Light Horseman, I talked to Eric D. Johnson in the last couple of weeks about Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream, which he covered in full. That will be an episode coming up soon. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and you'll see that one drop in a few weeks here. I have some other great guests coming up in 2021. Jesse Marchant, Caitlin Demaray, quite a few on the books already. Please rate and review the show wherever you can. I think Apple Podcasts is the place. It helps so much. beforethestreampodcast@gmail.com. If you want to reach out and say we got something wrong or we got something right, or you want to hear something or anything, Before the Stream is our handle on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you again for listening. Happy New Year once again. Here's to hope and optimism in 2021. Talk to you very soon. Bye.